could have Commissioner roll call, please.
Hello and welcome to Opportunity Homes San Antonio's Operations and Real Estate Committee meeting. Please note that this meeting is recorded in its entirety. Turn your microphone on to speak into it. The red light will turn on when the microphone is active. I will now begin to conduct the Commissioner roll call. Chair Gabriel Lopez.
Here.
Committee Chair and Vice Chair Gilbert Casillas.
Here.
Commissioner Dalia Contreras. Commissioner Estrellita Garcia Diaz.
Here.
Commissioner Janet Garcia. Commissioner Leila Powell.
Here.
Commissioner Vincent Robinson.
Here.
Doug Ponick, Board of Commissioners Attorney.
I'm here.
President and CEO Ed Hinojosa Jr.
I'm here.
And at the back of the room, we have our interpreter available for those who need it. You may call the meeting to order.
The Board of Commissioners or its committee may hold a closed meeting pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071-076 for consultation concerning attorney-client matters, real estate litigation, personnel, and security matters. The Board or committee reserves the right to enter into closed meeting at any time during the course of the meeting. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
There are no citizens signed up to speak.
All right, we'll move on to our individual item. Consideration and appropriate action regarding Resolution 6500, authorizing the award of a contract for Victoria Plaza roof replacement to Garland DBS Incorporated through Omnia Partners Public Sector for an amount not to exceed $4,455,642. I guess it's not Muriel. Hector.
She's right behind.
Oh, okay, I didn't see her, I'm
She's
sorry.
behind me. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee. I'm pleased to present this item to you for your consideration. This is an action item for the award of a contract to a commercial professional roofing contractor, Garland DBS, for the comprehensive roof replacement at the Victoria Plaza Apartments. As you may be aware, we recently, last year, completed a substantial renovation of the Victoria Plaza Apartments. This is a mid-century modern 9-story senior disabled high-rise in our public housing portfolio. And this piece, I remember Commissioner Lopez, when you walked it, one of the first things you asked me is, are you going to power wash the building? And I said, in a future phase we will, and here we are.
Okay.
So this contract is brought to you in response. The San Antonio Opportunity Home applied for City of San Antonio bond funds on an RFP that the city issued in 2022. The city decided to award this project for funding in the amount of $2.5 million in bond funds. The balance of the funds to cover the contract will be covered with the annual capital fund grant. So this project is a comprehensive roof replacement. So what the contractor is going to do is they're going to demolish the existing built-up gravel roof that is currently on the building, and they're going to replace it with a system of rigid foam boards installation that's going to have a cap sheet that's a highly reflective granular cap sheet, providing an R value, a 25 R value on the roof of this building. For the first time, it'll have a roof with an R value, which will only help the energy performance of the building. I think one of the reasons the city chose this project, first of all, it's an affordable housing project, it's senior apartments in our public housing portfolio, and the green and sustainable aspects of this project are really exciting. So the roof, on top of that brand new roof that's going to be insulated, we're going to install a rather large photovoltaic solar panel system on top of the roof. That'll feed down into the community room. We'll have monitors on it at all times that monitor the performance of the solar panel system. Some other components of this roof replacement include, like I said, power washing of the structure. We have funds in this contract for select crack repairs, structural repairs. Nothing significant that we encountered on this building over the 60 years. The structure's held up quite well. There's just some minor cracks and spalling, so those will be repaired. A big component of this project is going to be the replacement of the gutters and downspout systems. We have to be very careful here because this building is very sensitive in the historic aspects. It is registered in the historical registry of buildings in the Federal Registry. And so how we approached this project and the previous restoration project was that it was a restoration of a mid-century modern 60-year-old building. And so the gutters and downspouts, what is there now are copper gutters and downspouts that were the original material. We're going to replace those. We have a provision in the contract where Garland will remove each gutter and downspout, store them securely for us on site so that we can auction off the material. We know it has a lot of value, and so we can recoup those funds back to the Housing Authority. And we're going to replace them with new gutters and downspouts that are copper colored, that are not copper actually, and so they'll maintain their color and they won't patina over the years like copper tends to do. So that'll be in this project. Those gutters and downspouts will collect the rain runoff and feed two 10,000-gallon rain cistern tanks. That'll feed a future irrigation system for this project. They're also going to provide some bird spikes, so some bird deterrents around the building to keep the pigeons away. And then finally some structural tie-offs on the roof so that in the future, anybody who's up there servicing the roof, maintaining it, has a nice safe place to tie off. So that captures the scope of work for the project. If anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to respond to them. If not, I can turn this presentation over to Muriel Roeder to discuss the procurement.
Just out of curiosity, given the logistics and our relationship with the community there, surrounding community, crane placement, it'll be temporary, or I guess luffing crane? I mean, how will they, would that be in the back of the building, I assume?
A temporary construction elevator is going to be
Oh, for materials.
set up on the building. It'll be actually on the front-facing area of the building is what we have planned now, so it'll be out of the way of residents. It won't be an eyesore. It'll be fenced off and properly secured so that people can't wander into that area. And so, yeah, it'll be up there for the duration of the project. We'll make sure that whatever is erected and mounted to the building is safe. We'll get a structural engineer to approve it. We'll keep an eye on it, make sure that it won't cause any problems.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. As you may have read, this has been a long so we initially started off this procurement process back in of 2023. And at that time, we directly solicited to some 5 vendors that had been awarded contracts through Omnia Partners, and 2 responses were received. And unfortunately, both were deemed non-responsive. One did not include a bid bond as required by the solicitation, and the other really had not been awarded a roofing contract through the cooperative purchasing program. And so as a result, we resolicited this item, and that was done in August of 2023. And that was basically sent out to, and as a result, we got 3 responses for that. And because of the types of responses we had received, and we really hadn't done business with these vendors, we actually reached out to one of our architects to help us evaluate the responses to ensure the value was there, everybody understood, and we could be very comfortable and confident in what they were providing. And as a result of the review that was done by the architect, it was deemed best for the organization to re-solicit and re-advertise the project. And so we did once again, and that happened in October, and we solicited to vendors that were on our co-ops once again. And that time, we were able to solicit to 9 vendors, and we did receive 2 responses. And so the review process, and we did engage our architect once again. We're recommending a contract award to Garland DBS. They are the lowest price qualified respondent. Your packet, you do have the 2 bids that were received that reflect that they are the lowest price. And so, as Hector mentioned, the award includes comprehensive roof replacement, roof-mounted solar panel system, new gutters and downspouts, structural concrete crack repairs, bird deterrent, power washing of the entire structure, and installation of 2 10,000-gallon rainwater cisterns. And the cost for this project is not expected to exceed an amount of $4,455,642, of which $2.5 million is going to be covered by the city's housing bond that we received. Today, we do actually have the potential awardee with us. So Garland representatives are here. Please stand up, please. So if you have any questions regarding what their plans are for this project, I'm sure they'll be happy to entertain them.
Anyone have any questions? Any questions? Okay, I'll call for a motion.
So moved.
Call for a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Move on to our discussion items. Item number 4, update and discussion regarding the 2023 media summary. Michael Reyes, Public Affairs Officer.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I wanted to give you a quick update on the media relations for our last calendar year. We had more than 600 mentions in local media, state and national media. It's a 71% increase from the previous period. There were 36 total positive stories, but the big story here, if you will, is that we received more than 90% positive coverage in the calendar year. So that's a huge increase from previous years, but I think it's a reflection of all the good work that this organization and all the staff is doing throughout the year. So we're just the folks who promote the stories, but the stories really come from our residents and staff who are doing all the good work on the field. So you'll see there that the actual number is 95.4%. The negative stories were 3.6%, and not rated, meaning our media monitoring software couldn't detect whether they're very neutral, so they're 1.1%. But overall, we're really proud of the fact that it's a really high number of positive stories throughout the year. We had 19 press releases throughout the year. There was 77% earned media coverage, meaning we put the labor in trying to get that positive news coverage. There were 28 items covered by the media. Obviously, not everything we sent out to news organizations is covered, so there were a few items that were not covered. But overall, we had more than 60% of online news. Online news meaning, for example, like the San Antonio Report is an online news organization. If a television station posts something online, that's considered online news as well. So the majority of our coverage is online, which is important because it has the largest reach across the city, across the state, and nationally as well. So, and of course, Texas Public Radio as well, if they post something online, that's considered online for these measurements. The majority of our stories came from Texas Public Radio. We had 53 stories last calendar year, followed by the most watched local news station, which is KSAT TV. And you can see San Antonio Express News was right in the middle. The San Antonio Current exceeded the amount of stories that the Express News covered in the last calendar year, and then the last two, WOAI and KBB, with the least number of stories. And so we're really proud of this because we were able to flip that script in the last few years. Typically, as the case is with any public housing authority across the country, the old philosophy, if it bleeds, it leads, tends to be the way forward for many TV broadcasts. And so we try to emphasize that, these are families that are making an important impact in our city, and there's a lot of positive stories. It's not just negative. And so we're proud that TPR and KSAT have been dominant in terms of recipients of our news coverage, and so we're really proud of that. The top stories of the last calendar year, it started with TPR. That's with the Nancy Smith Hurd Foundation grant coverage. We got some great coverage from that story. KSAT covered our HCV waitlist, and there was great coverage there as well. And of course, the holiday gift distribution by Ken's TV. We've also did a lot of earned media, and that included to Telemundo on the Opportunity Home Resident Scholarships. Ed was quoted in the New York Times piece, which was picked up across the country, and the Business Journal has done some incredible work covering all the new developments and work we're doing on that front. So we're really proud of these top stories last year. Moving over from traditional media to social media, we saw some incredible gains across all the platforms. We saw increases in followers, we saw increases in posts, we saw increases in page and profile impressions. We've had some trouble with engagement. I know the algorithm with Facebook in particular is very structured, where if you're paying for it, you're going to get a lot more screen time on their home page, and we have limited funds to do that. So we have to rely on the engagement of those who follow us. So there's some work there to do with the engagement, but overall, you can see the numbers. There's an increase across the board, across our platforms. In particular with Facebook, we saw a 13% increase in the number of followers. The number of posts, we've more than 150%. Page impressions, more than 160%. You'll see there on the right side under engagement, there's that decrease. We've noticed that change in the last year with their system and how it operates and whether they determine what gets profiled and what doesn't. And so we're still working around that to see how we can increase that engagement. On LinkedIn, it's a very useful platform for us, especially for our human resources department. We saw more than a 230% increase on page and profile impressions, which is great because it highlights a lot of the good work we do as an organization to many of our community partners and other important stakeholders. Instagram, we saw an increase there as well. We're very mindful of how to use it, but given that half of our families are children and under the age of 18, and that demographic tends to use Instagram a lot more than Facebook or the other platforms, it's important that we use this platform to communicate to our families, because many of our families, the kids are the line of communication to their head of household. So we want to make sure that the information we're getting out to our families is reached to this particular demographic, and in some cases, they're the source of information for their household. So it's an important platform for us. And then finally, for X Twitter, which we all can say is dying a slow death, we think it's still important to be on there. We know that two important demographics are on there, and those are politicians and journalists. They still communicate on this platform, so we're very careful in what we put on there, but it's an important channel to communicate to those two demographics, journalists and elected officials, on what we're doing and to get a better understanding on what they're doing. So it's important from that perspective. There's a counter platform now with Threads through Microsoft, and we're still debating whether or not we want to dive into that. I think we're going to do a pilot test just to see whether it's useful for us and if we get any traction from it. But for now, X Twitter will remain in 2024 in terms of a platform that we're going to utilize and make sure that we take advantage of. The top posts across these platforms with Facebook, we had resident profiles earlier last year. Of course, the HCV waitlist and the rental assistance were all huge stories that gained lots of traction on Facebook in particular. On LinkedIn, the appointments of our chairman, Chair Lopez, and profiles from our staff in the Business Journal and, of course, the Victoria Plaza project you just heard from our colleagues, Muriel and Hector, got lots of traction on LinkedIn. On Instagram, lots of work that the organization is doing with local community groups, back to Victoria Plaza as well, and the work that CDI is doing in the community as well. Twitter, lots of profiles on our EDI work, in particular with Dr. Briggs, CDI work, and community relations that the organization's undertaking. So that's a quick speed trip down media, traditional and social media lane, but I would be happy to answer any of your questions.
Chairman, I have a couple of comments and maybe a question. I'm not sure I know enough to ask an informed question. So first of all, the numbers, the increases look great, and I think it's really exciting that the tone of the coverage overall has been positive. But I am interested in the opportunity for engagement with these folks versus the reporting out that we heard, and I realize we're correcting the problem, but you know, if 85% of our phone calls aren't getting answered, but we have this great opportunity to expand engagement with the community via these social media platforms, you know, are there ways of porting some of this communications over to folks who might have trouble reaching us by other means? Are there ways that we can engage and get feedback utilizing social media that could complement, not replace, but could complement some of the other communications, and particularly while we're still trying to design new solutions to facilitate communications?
Absolutely. Facebook is an important platform for our residents. They rely on that to communicate with us, so we work closely with our operations support team to field questions, and so our staff addresses questions in real time. So typically we get messages in the evening between 6 p.m. and midnight, and our staff responds to that in real time. If there's a complicated question in terms of case management or something that requires digging in a little deeper, then we refer that to our operations support staff who will respond. But that's something that's been ongoing for many years, and so we know that our residents rely on that platform to communicate in real time, and so we've been mindful that you know, we have to keep that line of communication open to them or with them.
So I was wondering if Brandy could talk about the phone calls that you mentioned not being answered, because we're getting thousands of phone calls a week, I know, that come in. And go ahead.
Thank you, Ed. So since you did mention the phone calls, we know that our volume has increased substantially. We've always had a large number of calls that come in. When we're serving over 20,000 residents, we get a lot of calls. And so my team is working closely with Joanna and her team, and we're actually looking at our existing services, seeing where we could expand that. We are making changes to our phone calls. We've added more staff. We're also looking at it not just through that system, but holistically, what is our customer service delivery? So we're doing a lot of behind the scenes, but ultimately we're trying to improve our quality and our response time.
Thank you.
Michael, I do want to congratulate you on a job well done. I know it's hard dealing with the press sometimes and getting your message out there, and sometimes they ignore it if it's not a good news story. But are there issues with dealing with Univision? Because I noticed that they're not on there at all. I mean, you know, our Hispanic media, I feel, is important, especially in this city, because a lot of the people that we serve are Spanish speaking only, and it's sad to see that the least watched Hispanic network is putting some stuff out there, but the most watched network is, I don't see anything there.
Right, we do our due diligence to make sure that Univision and Telemundo both get all of our pitches. We try hard. In fact, Telemundo hosted one of our staffers recently to talk about the HCV waitlist. So there is some engagement, but it's not as robust as we want it to be, but we keep on trying. It's up to their editorial staff to determine what's newsworthy or not. So we try to not only pitch, but also build relationships with their staff. And I know that you know, we try to have a working relationship with them and try to get an idea of what they want to hear from us. But there's a lot of competing organizations, lots of competing news, but we'll keep on, you know, we'll keep at it. With that said, we also worked with HR to do a huge recruitment promotion on Spanish radio. So we did lots of Spanish radio and English radio as well last year, which actually I just realized wasn't reflected here. So that's something to take note of as well.
Thank you.
Michael, along that vein, no, I think y'all are doing a great job, and I like to see it. I see what y'all are doing continuously. You certainly have helped me when I've asked those questions. In light of items or events that we have in front of us, we do promote things like that. For example, the Saturday event, the housing event, this Saturday that for the SHIP initiative. We do our paces and do promote that, correct?
That's
and
right.
Maybe we need to double our efforts, obviously, because it helps all of our residents as well as those across the city that are not in our programs yet. Secondary, did we ever, given the monies that we received from the bond, did we ever release stories associated with that, kind of in the spirit of partnership type of thing? Hey, this is what the city has done with us and for us. Did that ever gain any traction?
Well, I think it's ongoing because we don't want to compete with our partners at COSA because they're also trying to wave the bond flag and get credit for all the work they've done as well. So it's really in partnership with them. So there's a lot of projects happening this year that we're looking forward to really working closely with them to do a huge media campaign and highlighting that work. So that's ongoing, but there's a lot to look forward to this year.
Sure. Okay, great. Thanks.
One more question. I don't know if it's your department that handles this, but the TV screens in the lobbies of the properties, is that under you?
We provide the content, but we work with our partners at properties to make sure they turn on the monitors.
Because I've noticed that it hasn't been working lately, and usually a lot of residents look at that for information also. So
we'll work with property staff and IT to make sure that, I'm not sure how we force folks to turn on the monitors or not turn them off, but we'll continue working on
thank you. Any other questions?
Just one last comment. Shelter Force, the online and print magazine Shelter Force, is doing a series right now on the intersection of green and sustainable development and affordable housing. And it seems to me like the Victoria Plaza project that we were just talking about with the installation of the catchment tanks and the photovoltaics could be a good example for them. I don't know how standard that is. I haven't heard of our having those improvements at any of our other properties, but I don't know how standard that is across the country. But if it's innovative, I think we should promote it.
Thank you. We'll definitely look into it. And I failed to recognize our senior communications manager, Brent Arnold, who is the first line of defense with journalists. So he has a tough job of having the off-the-record conversations and the on-the-record conversations. So kudos to him and his team for all this good work. So.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Item number 5, update and discussion regarding Opportunity Home legislative update and priorities. Michael Reyes, Public Affairs Officer.
Here we go. This is the fun stuff. So as you know, we're heading into a really interesting legislative session that's ongoing on the Hill in DC. So our role coming up in various forums, whether it's SE to DC in 2 weeks or our NARO Washington outreach in early April, is to really advocate for 2 things: public housing and vouchers. As we all know, the House is very in a predicament right now with what Speaker Johnson wants to do against the hardliners in the House. There's this Fiscal Responsibility Act that goes into effect, sequestration for the lack of a better word, that kicks in late April, early May, which will slash everything by 9% if there isn't a long-term deal. And 9% to HUD would be about $5 billion and devastating to all housing organizations, including us, if that deal were not to occur. So right now we're under a continuing resolution until March 1st, and so there's still time for the House to find something long-term to avoid sequestration before May 1st. And so our job, our role, is to really defend what we have now and not really, typically you would go up there and ask for additional resources and advocate for that. At this point, we just want to keep things at the 2004 fiscal levels versus asking for more for 2025 because it's so delicate at the moment. So typically our funding priorities would be is to encourage Congress to maintain their commitment to federal housing. At this point, they can't pass a budget as the case has been for the last few years. So that's why we're once again in the CR. And so we also want to remind them that inflation has taken a toll on organizations like ours and across the country. I think Secretary Fudge said in her testimony a few weeks ago that hundreds of thousands of vouchers have been affected because of inflation. So the Congress has to maintain funding to at least meet inflation and ideally provide additional vouchers beyond those impacted by inflation. And of course, fully fund public housing. At this point, and I'll ask our CFO to make sure I'm saying this right, we're only 87% funded for public housing. And obviously that's a gap to us and to the more than 3,000 public housing authorities across the country. So that's something all of us in this space have been asking Congress to keep in mind. And so fortunately, we have the support of our trade associations, NARO, CLAFA, FADA, and many other partners who help us to speak in one voice and advocate for this funding. And of course, equity and inclusion is something that's important to the administration and to some folks in Congress that we want to emphasize that this is an important part moving forward in how we administer housing. Part of the regulatory priorities as well, this is more regarding HUD and our interactions with the department, is obviously making sure that there's barriers to credit histories are reduced for Section 8 residents. And there's exceptions from the Build America, Buy America legislation as well, which requires organizations to buy materials from the country, and that limits our scope given our limited funding and limited opportunities to build affordable housing, and just allow continued flexibility in how we administer our programming at public housing authorities in particular. We're focused on several pieces of legislation, and this is where it gets tricky, is because this is what's been ongoing for the last fiscal year or so, and that's HR 305 and HR 6318, but we don't know what's going to happen. At this point, appropriations are going to start in about 2 months. There's lots of discussions, so we're not sure what the Congress or what the authorizing committees will propose from their respective members, and so we have to be in a situation where we're ready to react the moment a member proposes a piece or co-authors pieces of legislation, and then it goes to committee and be on standby with our trade associations to really advocate or push against certain bills. And so that process starts in March, April, and it goes throughout the summer. And so when we're there in March, or April rather, for the NARO Washington conference, we're right in the middle of the appropriations process, and so that's really an opportunity for us to achieve some gains in terms of what we're trying to achieve here in defending public housing, increasing public housing funding, and maintaining our vouchers, and if possible, increasing the number of vouchers. But these are in particular, acts that we're focused on at the moment, but it's in flux. It'll change in the coming weeks. Moving quickly to state priorities, there aren't funding mechanisms like the community project funding option that there currently is in Congress, which that's a fancy word to say earmarks. And earmarks came back a few years ago, and we've been fortunate to have benefited from those earmarks to help with capital improvements at some of our properties. So we're really grateful for that support from our Bexar County congressional delegation, and we'll continue seeking support. We don't know where it is at the moment in terms of whether the CR or other members may pull that option aside, but at the moment we're anticipating that the earmarks will continue beginning next month, so we'll be on standby for that. And obviously there's other issues that we would like to promote here statewide, and that's the source of income discrimination, helping funding, provide funding for housing providers like ourselves in terms of capital improvements. We know the politics in our state. We know it's difficult to make inroads in this space, but at the same time, we don't want to simply give up and say, well, we'll wait for the political environment to improve. I think we have lots of partners in the state. We have a nice coalition building with our municipal partners here, and who are working with our other municipal partners across the state to really speak as one voice. And so with all this to say, there's a lot of work moving forward statewide, but we're not giving up. And we're still going to try to tell the story of our families and remind state officials, which I don't think we do enough, that their constituents are our constituents. We're working for the same folks here. So it's not them versus us, it's the same folks. And so we have to do a better job at reminding them that we have an obligation as public servants to help these individuals and not other ways of impacting policy, that we're really here as public servants, and that's something that we want to take, and we often take to Austin, and we'll continue doing so. So next steps, as I mentioned, is the community project funding earmarks. We anticipate them happening, and we'll be sure to reach out to our triple Cs, as I like to call them, Cuellar, Castro, and Casar, to support us. They've been very supportive in the last few years, and I know they'll continue supporting us moving forward. We'll continue looking at funding opportunities at every level, federal, state, and local, to see how we could maximize the dollars we currently have and leverage those dollars to do more. And then, of course, working with all of our partners across the city. And as I mentioned, we work closely with our trade associations in Washington who are on the ground, who are getting lots of information on what's happening. And so next steps would be SE to DC. That housing team is made up of, I think, 17 individuals, led by our city housing officer, Mark Carmona, and also Deborah Guerrero of NRP, who are leading that cohort going up in 2 weeks. And so there's a joint agenda, which is primarily focused on low income tax credits and also renter assistance, and some other priorities as well. So we'll be up there advocating for our priorities, which is public housing and vouchers, and we'll do that during several meetings that are being scheduled on the Hill, and several meetings, I believe, that delegation's organizing with HUD as well. So we'll be there to advocate on behalf of our families and the work we do. And then beyond that, in April, as I mentioned, we'll be there again during the NARA Washington trip to specifically advocate alongside our colleagues in the public housing space to push for these reforms that we discuss. At that point, we'll be in appropriation, so we'll be in a better position to make inroads and have our voice would be amplified given the process that we'll be in the middle of. So beyond those two things, we work throughout the year, every week, every day, pushing for additional funding and reminding our elected officials of all the good work that this organization is doing. And with that, I'd like to introduce James Rivera, who's our government relations colleague who does a lot of the frontline work. And so we're both here to answer any questions you may have about this.
I just want to thank you once again for the work that you do, especially on the Hill. I know that through your connections, and James, we've had some very positive meetings with our elected officials of the San Antonio delegation on both sides of the House. And thank you for always putting those meetings together and putting the information that we can do our asks to be able to help this organization. So thank you and James for the work that you all do.
Thank you. Any questions?
I'm just excited to see that we have a nice balance. Affordable housing is an industry, but affordable housing is also a mission and a public trust. And so it's nice that we have a good balance of folks who are advocating for the sector, representing the community going up to DC. And I know we have a staffer who will be also on that trip and arranging some extra opportunities to learn about some things that are going on in DC, like cooperative purchase of buildings. And so I would hope that other folks on the housing group would take advantage of those as well.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. Discussion item number 6, update and discussion regarding residents feel safe outcomes, security, and security measures. Richard Melk, Planning Officer, and Brandy Pettis, Chief Operating Officer.
Mr. Committee Chair, the next 2 items are listed in open session, but we also have a closed session item for security concerns. And so if there's any specific questions the board would like to discuss in closed session, we'll have an opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Brandy and I are going to tag team on this one. I'll kick it off, and then I'll hand it off to Brandy. We periodically provide you updates on various aspects of the strategic plan. This presentation is focused on one of our resident priority outcomes. Residents feel safe, and we're going to structure this so that we'll start out with a discussion of our survey results, and then talk about how the survey results inform our strategic planning process itself, and then how that process plays out on the ground, and that's where Brandy's going to pick it up and talk about initiatives and actions that are underway today at various properties. So, but it all starts with the survey results. We survey residents twice a year, and the results of those surveys inform a lot of our questions and our decision making around planning priorities. The kinds of questions we ask include, in this case, in the last 30 days, how safe did you feel? And the most recent survey came back saying that overall, 67% of our residents across all portfolios and programs felt mostly safe or always safe in their last 30 days. So that's, as you can see on the lower left, you can see a chart that goes back to FY21. So we've asked this question now for 3 years, and we can see that the responses have fluctuated around that number, 66%, 69%, 67%, so more or less constant. And after that, you can see how we use this information. So this is a key indicator for in our strategic plan as a priority outcome. We use this to gauge our impact, and so you can see in the line that extends out into the future towards FY27 shows a steadily increasing response to 71%. That is our 5-year target. That's where we want to be by that point. We can take this survey information and slice and dice it in a few ways. We can, by program, AHP is the voucher program, assisted housing program, and public housing. You can see there is a difference there in the responses. 77% of voucher households felt always safe or somewhat safe, compared to 56% of public housing. We also track disability status of the head of household. 74%, those households that have a head of household that reports a disability of some kind reported that they felt safe at a rate of 74% versus 68%. And then also by race and ethnicity. There you can see the results, Hispanic or Latino at 67%, Black or African American at 80%, and non-Hispanic white at 70%. When we follow up with those, for those residents that did not always feel safe, we ask them why not. We ask them what are the issues that made you feel not always safe. And we call these the challenges. And so this is the latest list of challenges. In the blue box, there's the top 6. Insufficient security measures at 63%, followed by criminal activity, stray or unleashed animals, presence and behavior of unauthorized individuals, quality of housing, and neighbors' behavior take us down to 54%. These challenges we can also break up by program, and here we start to see some interesting differences. Both assisted housing and public housing list insufficient security measures and criminal activity. Those are the top 2, though, for the voucher households, whereas for public housing, insufficient security measures is further down the list. Criminal activity is at the top. Now, unique to AHP is there are three factors, three challenges that are unique to voucher households: stray or unleashed animals, lack of repairs and maintenance, and neighborhood conditions. Those are all top challenges for voucher households that do not show up with public housing. On the other hand, for public housing residents, property theft and damage, presence and behavior of unauthorized individuals, and quality of housing show up in the top 5, and that's unique to public housing. So that starts to speak to the response and how we might strategically decide to respond to one program differently than another. One of the things we can start to do this year is compare to last year, and we can see how the rankings of challenges has changed from year to year or stayed constant. So the top 2 challenges that have remained constant over for the past 2 years are insufficient security measures and criminal activity. However, you can see that what's in third place this year, stray or unleashed animals, wasn't even an issue last year. It's a new topic that popped up during the survey, and it popped up straight to number 3. And as you remember from the previous slide, that is a challenge that's more, it's unique to Section 8 households. Is there a question?
I'm sorry to interrupt you real quick.
Sure.
Does that reflect perceived dangerous animals? Would that be categorized in that same?
I think what we picked up on was, animals roaming around the neighborhood that are not under someone's control. Yeah.
Because, we've had residents talk about they have a specific breed and it's dangerous.
I don't
didn't know
think
if
that was
includes-
I don't think that was part of this. Yeah, this was more about
Stray, yeah.
strays in the neighborhood. Yeah.
Okay.
I think the only other thing I would point out from this chart is the challenges that dropped also from year to year. So what was in third place last year, lack of repairs and maintenance, was a great cause of feelings of undermining feelings of safety, and that dropped to number 7 for this year. So that's worth noting as well. So this is all sort of raw data that we then take into account. We try to analyze it in different ways. Every year we learn a little bit more about how to do that better. But then we use it to inform our planning process. And so I want to share with you a little bit of what that plan looks like for residents, specifically for residents feel safe. And one of the first decisions we need to make is, who is the plan for? What populations are we focused on? And currently we are focused on Beacon residents and on public housing residents. Now the reason that voucher households, AHP, are not on that list is because the survey showed, there's various reasons, but one of the reasons is that the survey showed that they were coming back more satisfied, they had greater feelings of safety than these 2 populations. So in the interest of focusing our resources, at least for this year, we decided to focus on Beacon and public housing. I think another reason that comes up is that these are areas where we have more direct control over the resident experience as well. So there's 3 strategies that are being developed at the Tier 1 level. You may remember we talked about a 3-tier scorecard a few months ago at a different presentation, and these are the same tiers. So Tier 1 is the organization-wide priorities, and there's three strategies that we're looking at. I'm going to talk a little bit more about each of these. Well, one is social cohesion, building trust and reciprocity. Secondly is centralized data management and ensuring that employees collect, analyze, and act on safety data in the context of larger trends, et cetera. And thirdly, that resident and employee health and safety are not repeatedly threatened by other residents' criminal activity or serious lease violations. So these statements are ways of organizing our work and saying these are our goals for this year. These are the 3 outcomes that we really want to work towards. Let me just say a little bit about social cohesion, and I want to thank our Director of Security, Domingo Ibarra, who's been working with us closely to and shared this concept with us, and we've been fleshing it out and taking the assumptions and principles that are a part of this social cohesion discussion and trying to convert them to actionable items. So what you have on the left is kind of our starting point, this idea of social cohesion as trust, reciprocity, organized altruism, with some assumptions here that trust is a key indicator of social cohesion, and that trust leads to reciprocity, meaning the willingness of individuals to help each other out or sacrifice for other members of a group. So those are great principles, great assumptions. How do we operationalize them? How do we make them actionable? And we've developed over the last few months these three statements on the right that are outcome statements. So for residents, the outcome is we want residents to know that they've been heard. That's an important part of this social cohesion work. For employees, we want employees to understand the specific needs of individual communities. Not all communities are the same. There is no one-size-fits-all approach. We need to understand the differences of individual communities. And thirdly, stakeholders and partners understand employees' and residents' specific needs. So how do we work with our partners to ensure that they know the situation on the ground? So that's social cohesion. It's still in development. These are the initial outcome statements that we are working towards, and then the next step is to really do some prioritization work, put them on some timelines, and decide where do we start first, and what does that look like. Let me say a little bit about centralized data management. That's the second Tier 1 outcome that we're working towards. Currently, we receive data from SAPD, and it goes straight to the property managers because they need to respond on the ground to the situation that's specific to their property. What this approach would add to the mix is a centralized workflow where SAPD incidents would be gathered, processed, and stored in a central warehouse using GIS and other data processing tools. And then we would use that warehouse data to then generate standard centralized reports through various kinds of dashboards that would tell us, allow us to compare apples to apples across various scales. So we could see how rates of incidents might vary citywide, might vary by portfolio. We might be able to see trends over time, see where there's hot spots or spikes of activity, where there's maybe intensifying or diminishing activity, and be able to look at the bigger picture across the city and help that, and see if that can help us inform our policy making at the larger level. So with that in mind, I now want to share with you some early exploratory work that we've done on this effort. So this is, just to say it frankly, the first time that we've really embraced or engaged with this kind of data. We are learning about it as we go. We've been working with SAPD for years, but this kind of analysis is something that we're excited to be learning about. But having said that, we also know that there's plenty to learn. But we wanted to take it to look at and provide an example of you of what we want to do and get feedback from you about the overall approach. So, for this example, we looked at Lavaca neighborhood, which we looked at it. The area, 3 block groups, census block groups west of I-37, east of South St. Mary's, south of Cesar Chavez, and north of I-10. And using that census data, we added SAPD incident data as well as our internal inventory data to come up with a timeline analysis of both violent and property incident rates. So this first slide is a count per 1,000 units of violent crime incidents going back to 2014 and ending in 2023. What you see on the chart is a black line, which is the citywide rates. And then you'll see also a blue line, which is the Lavaca neighborhood rates. That's everything within that map area that we showed in the previous slide. And then you also see a yellow line. That is our properties. That's Refugio, Hemis View, Victoria Plaza, and 100 Labor. And then the final line, the purple one, is the Lavaca neighborhood excluding our properties. So the blue minus the yellow equals purple. So the other thing on this chart is a shaded area, that shaded blue background that corresponds to the closing and reopening of Victoria Plaza. So we shut it down in 2017 and moved people out, and then started moving people back in 2023. Excuse me. So I think there's some things we already know we don't know about this data. For example, I'll tell you, I don't know what the margins of error are on this data. That's one of our next steps, is to figure that out. But I think, so the best way to use this data is to take off your glasses and just squint and kind of look at the general trends. Because it becomes obvious at that point, right? The key message here is that the experience of the Lavaca neighborhood is very different from citywide experience. Citywide, we've seen a steady rise in violent incidents per 1,000 units, with a dip in 2023. But the trends at the neighborhood level are very different. We see maybe a peak in 2017, and then a decrease through 2020, and then an increase again through 2023. So during the period of Victoria Plaza's closure, we saw both a decrease and an increase in incidents. 2020, of course, is, I think, the beginning of the pandemic, so that may be an inflection point to think about if you look at this data and try to make sense of it.
Sorry, again, when did we vacate Victoria Plaza for the repair, for the renovation?
2017.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's the blue shaded area in the background. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's the blue shaded.
That's what this area represents.
And it was still vacant.
Correct.
When the
That's
rise
correct.
began.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, no, that's a good idea. Pick something in between for next time. Yeah, I think it's just the default citywide. We just went straight to, yeah. That's a good idea, though. From council district to council district, yep.
And utilizing that would be good information that maybe we can get out, whether in a presentation format or in the dashboard, if it's not already included. But to spell it out for, our partners in the council, so that way they know what they're looking, at least their staff, they know what they're looking at.
That's a good idea. Thank you. I think various things. From the data perspective, and we're trying to learn what we can do and at what capacity we can build and what kind of additional data we might need, or additional techniques we might need to use to make sure we are communicating accurately and learning from this. I think ultimately we want this to inform the larger decision-making process, right? If we have an understanding of these trends, if we can see how things that are happening at specific properties mirror or don't mirror what's happening at a council district or citywide level, then our response would change accordingly, right? If it's something that's unique to a property or a community, then that implies a certain direction, maybe a certain set of partners that we might want to work with, versus if we see something happening in a property that reflects a larger trend. For example, there was an article, was it last weekend, regarding vehicle break-ins, right, and the spike. But we've certainly seen that vehicle break-ins here, but I think the article pointed out that Chief McManus was talking about that being a national, maybe even an international trend related to Kias and Hyundais. So
I think my question might have been off. I look at this data and I think a lot about the comments that come in through public comment. And a lot of, the community coming and saying, well, now that you've, reopened and folks are living here again, crime is shot out the roof, right? And, the complaints that we'll receive. I look at this data and it's like, well, actually, something without the second half, right? If we looked at 2018 and 19 and 2020, we'd be like, oh, wow, there could potentially be a strong correlation or causation with folks, being displaced and then, brought back in. But the second half, the 2021 and 22, it's hard to make that correlation knowing that they weren't living there yet again. And so I'm just curious is like, what else are we going, well, there's so much to learn, right? We can't make a lot of assumptions. It's like, okay, this is a good starting point. It makes us very curious. Are we talking to the city? Are we talking to police? Are we talking to, what else happened that could explain why there was such a dip and why it started going up? And I think it's important for us to be able to tell a story and share back to the community. It's a narrative that is perpetuating that when we reopened and folks came back in, that those residents are causing all these crime issues in the community. And I think it's a responsibility of ours to demystify some of those harmful narratives in protection of the residents at Victoria Plaza. And if there are things that are happening, right, to your point, we should do something to create a safer condition there for residents and the community. But this creates a lot of questions in my mind that I don't think we can answer by ourselves. And I'm just curious, like, what are we going to learn? Who are we learning with so that we can do something really helpful with this data?
So in general, I think we would want to learn from anybody else who's working in this arena. So SAPD, council members, and any other partners who are interested in the narrative and in understanding what the root causes are and what the different levels of intervention are and how we can work together to address those. I think Brandy's saying she's going to address that when her slides come up, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, exactly. That's what we're getting to the boots on the ground in just a few slides. Yeah.
I think there's also another issue going on here, which is that neighborhood did experience a rapid increase in violent crime activity and in property crime activity. But because they had been at a lower point than the city overall, although they're mirroring the increased trends for a couple years, it seemed more dramatic to them. So their experience of it, totally outside of whatever was going on at our property, was much more dramatic than it might have been in another neighborhood. And I think that's also what the commissioner was getting at, is how do we, tell this story or understand this story in a way that explains the absolute conviction that these folks have, which is not actually borne out by the data that we're looking at right now, that it's the reopening of our community that impacted the rates. And I think one thing that's interesting is this is great information. I live in a neighborhood that has a fairly high crime rate. I've never seen information like this presented to me as a neighborhood association member. So maybe we can help kind of raise that standard of communication around some of these issues so that it's, I know people are going to feel how they're going to feel, but it can be helpful to look at these trends and try to put that in perspective so that it's more of a systems approach and less of a what happened here last night.
Absolutely. The only other slide here is the property incidents, and I think this is in some ways a little messier, but also I think a little clearer, and the trends are the same, right? The Lavaca neighborhood trends mirror the city's trends pretty closely. You can still see sort of a dip and a rise similar to the violent incidents. With a shift up further up the scale. That it means excluding our properties, so excluding Refugio, Hemisphere, Victoria, and 100 Labor. So if you add yellow and purple, you get blue. That's what you get.
So the comparison there would be trajectory, not absolute number, because it is a smaller absolute number.
Well, these are rates, so
Okay.
we are trying to normalize them, and so they're all counts per 1,000 units. So that's tier one, and that's an example of how we want to use the data. I take your points about using this and to direct our communication process in a number of different ways. And what I'll share with you on this slide is what's currently happening, and then this will segue to Brandy's discussion of what's currently happening as well. But at the tier two level in the plan, both these are the priorities for Beacon and public housing. Beacon has 3 outcomes that they're focused on. Residents have a good relationship and communication with staff. Residents acknowledge and benefit from improved safety measures. This is specifically around lighting, and you'll hear more about this from Brandy. Residents are knowledgeable about how to protect themselves and their property is the third one. There's 5 outcomes under public housing. Residents are represented by resident councils, report instances of bullying to community managers, are knowledgeable about how to protect themselves and their property, feel safe walking near their property, and feel less vulnerable to crime at night. That's also about lighting as well. So under these sort of general outcomes, then we start to talk and see specific instances.
So when you you do a survey that's resident feedback to the organization. You disaggregate it, you look at the data, and you start implementing programs at scale. How are residents engaged through the process, right? Collected the data, here's what we learned about the data. Here's what we're thinking about doing. What that, how are they involved in the decision making of what are the strategies that we're going to put in place to move the needle? What's their engagement with that?
Okay.
You'll talk about that?
I think we could both say a little bit about it. I think we definitely engage them. The primary engagement is the feedback. We also have started going back to residents and showing them the results of the survey and sharing with them, this is what we heard, and Rosario Plasencia is taking the lead on that, and it generates a lot of conversation right at that point. It's like, well, that may or may not match, my own impression, but this, we're sharing back, here's what we heard. And through that conversation, we start to hear, maybe ideas about what can be done, specific strategies that might or might not work. But I think we're not at a stage yet where we can share about the results of strategies back to residents. So that's maybe next year we should be able to do that.
Well, even just strategies, right? I think as people, we make a lot of assumptions, like I'm helping solve a problem you have. I engage you in the beginning to find out what the problems are, and then I don't engage you anymore, and I go and decide solutions, implement solutions. That whole, there's, when you think about design justice and the questions we should ask ourselves, right? When there's an issue in a community, who gets to decide, who gets to define the issue? Is it the community or people who are outside? When there are solutions being generated, who gets to bring those solutions to the table? Is it the community or someone outside? When jobs are created or a decision is made, who gets to weigh into that? Is it the community or not? When a job is created to implement, do they get access to those jobs? And then when it comes time to evaluate the effectiveness, did they have an opportunity to feed it? So it's along the entire process. So I'm just really curious. I love the fact that there's, survey, there's analysis, there's the playback. Mm-hmm. I'm curious about their voice in. Here's what the things because they're all theory. I mean, some of them are clear. Lights, great, put up lights. Cameras, yeah, put up cameras. But the other things, is that something that resonates with them, that if you do it, it will result in a higher score because we're using the survey as a driver, right? Will it make a difference for them? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great idea. I know we are, You mentioned evaluation as well, and that is another area where we want to ensure that resident feedback, resident communication is more than just being informed, but also being involved in the decision making and thinking about that. I will say right now, it's as far as the planning process goes, that the in between stages that you mentioned are areas where we could do better.
I think, too, there's an opportunity for discussion at the resident meetings that our operating and property management folks have on a regular basis. And I'm sure Brandy's planning to talk a little bit about that during her presentation.
I am. So lots of great questions I have to remember. Hopefully I'll answer them. If I don't, please feel free to remind me what you asked. So as Richard kind of talked about, right, we started with the survey, we looked at it, we really have said, this is what we need to focus on. He did say, we saw the results from our housing choice voucher families as well as our public housing families. And as Richard mentioned, right, we have limited control over our private landlords, but we are looking at that at how many of those voucher families may be at a Beacon community and making sure that we're addressing those concerns. And so throughout this past year, we really have been focusing on several different initiatives, looking at assessments, expanding our partnerships, looking at property improvement and safety models. And so we did a lot of work around our lighting. Y'all will see that if y'all go to different communities, especially at night, our team has worked very fast, very quickly in identifying, looking at where we could upgrade. We've done a lot of work, and we're still not done with that. Security cameras, we have brought that back to the board a couple of times, and I'm not going to steal the thunder of Joanna and Domingo because I believe they have a presentation coming up to give some of updates on where we're at on that. We also are looking at entry control. We hear a lot of what is going on at the properties is we can even put the cameras in, but folks are still allowing access or even putting rocks. I know we had our chair actually went and visited a property and actually threw the rock over the fence, and someone yelled at him about that's the way I let my folks in. And so, but we know that's happening.
Not for throwing the rock though, it was for getting rid of their door stopper.
Yes, the door stopper. So we're trying to be mindful of not just into the property, but are there other things we can do at we hear the feedback through laundry. The laundry facilities often are places where some of our residents allow friends that may not have a stable home to come stay in, so they're warm. But it does create some fear at other residents. Resident and partner meetings, we're doing a lot of work. And so, Commissioner, I know you're saying, well, what are y'all doing? So part of our conversation is, here's what we know, but we know it's unique by property. The survey's not going to tell us by property, but what does tell us by property is when I'm out there or our directors are out there, we're actually meeting with our residents and bringing in partners to really have what does your property need and getting that direct feedback and trying to make those changes. Because we'll bring y'all and we talk high level, but you may want to say, I only want to know about this property because this is the residents I've met with recently. And that's where me being out in the field and Joelle and Melissa, as well as our assistant directors, we're really having those conversations. But what's also critical, and another question I believe you brought up, is the partner meetings. And so more recently, we were approached by the city of San Antonio and doing, in this work, we have a lot of different pilots going on because we want to see what works in which communities. And so we are actually doing a pilot and having some meetings about what's Mirasol. But part of the response is looking at it not just what we think, but bringing in our residents. And so we had some initial meetings with our partner to say, how are we going to approach this? Because there's multiple different ways. It's not just security, but what are some of the other resources that we can bring in? And so we're starting those meetings. There's going to be surveys that go out to those residents, but then we're bringing them because what we're talking about is we could all talk about security and safety every day and think about what we need, but we're not there living there at night. And so maybe if the community comes together and sees that we're tackling this as a together, that they'll be a little bit better and more receptive of, hey, they're here to help us, and let's help our community. And so that's some of the things that we're doing. We've also created the Rapid Response Team is actually an internal team, and because we do know that there are things that we do have criminal activity. We don't deny that there's criminal activity at our sites, but what we're trying to do is how do we better tackle that? Because ultimately, if there is a situation, we want to make sure the property management team is fully aware how to approach it, as well as our legal team, because sometimes it does get in through the unfortunate situations where we have to go through an eviction. But we want to make sure everybody is on the same page. We're moving fast based off of all of the different barriers that we have to work through on the legal system. And then resource allocation, right? Richard shared a lot about data about the Lavaca neighborhood. We have been using a lot of the information that we've been receiving from SAPD for years, but that is how we develop our resource allocation. Is it the best approach right now? Probably not, because we're not digging as down in the data as possible, but we know where those hot spots are, and that's where we deploy our resources, and making sure that our security contract, if we know we've had some additional crime stats go up, then we're going to spend more resources and allocate them over there, and then just reroute them through the different properties that we have. So we've been doing that for years, but now, like Richard said, it's really taken a deeper dive into that data.
Quick question you made me think of. Does the survey have participants click their property? Like, are you able to disaggregate it by property?
I'm going to bring Richard back up because I think we may have taken that part out.
Yeah, no, we switched our survey methodology to a random sampling, and so the trade-off there was that we're no longer able to drill down to that level of detail and it still be meaningful. Instead, the benefit of the random sampling is that we can ensure representation of key populations. So we know that we're getting representation for the older adults or disabled households, or by ethnicity or by gender.
Can you address one more question, though, about the methodology, though? I'm sorry, after...
No, go ahead.
Commissioner.
I can ask after you.
So just a slightly full, and I know you've told us before, but a slightly fuller account of the methodology that you use, and how how respondents who may not be accessible online or virtually are included in the survey.
Sure. So when we switched over to random sampling, we worked very closely with Dr. Potter at UTSA, and he and his team in his it's not his staff, but the team and not his students. Anyway, the folks that work with him closely worked very closely with us and Rosario and her team to make sure that we set it up correctly. Now, for statistical purposes. Now, as far as making sure we reached everybody, that is our practices that we developed even in the previous methodology. We would start with an email and to everyone that had an email address, and then we'd follow up with direct mail, sending paper copies to all the addresses that we know did not have email addresses. And then what's nice about the random sampling is that we know we have certain targets we need to reach, and so if at that point we still have a gap and we know we need to reach more older adults, then we'll go door to door. We'll actually go and we'll reach out either by phone or in person to make sure we reach the minimum number that we need for it to be statistically valid.
One more question, not about our survey methodology, but about whether you have access to community-wide comparable survey data to use as benchmarking, which we saw was very helpful with regard to crime statistics. But is anybody surveying the population of the city of San Antonio as a whole with regard to whether they feel safe in their neighborhood or what they perceive their challenges to be?
I have looked for that. I continue to look for it. If anyone else finds something, please let me know.
And what was
Thank you.
I know in the methodology before, we've always had like the information of like how many people actually participated in. What is I understand that there's sorry, you're using all the data terms, right?
Yeah.
But do we feel good about, like, we're putting a lot of analysis and effort in leveraging this data to drive decisions? Do we feel good about how many folks answered and
Yeah, that's one of the first questions when we took the initial results to Dr. Potter and his team. That was our question: is this enough? Did we hit the minimum required? Is this representative? And the answer is yes. We got close enough and over in some cases so that we can say we can make decisions based on this.
2 questions. How many surveys went out?
I don't know. I'm not. That's a different presentation. I can get that to you.
Okay, and how many respondents there were?
Yeah, the actual. Yeah, I can get you the actual numbers. What I can tell you today is that this new process is, has us focus on specific populations. So the overall number is less important than making sure that we got enough responses from the older adults that we need, the public housing residents that we need, all the subpopulations that we want to report on. So those are the 5 or 6 populations that are critical to us. Those are the numbers that we need to make sure we hit.
But my thing is that if we have 10,000 households and only 500 or 1,000 respond, I don't feel that is enough respondents to cover as far as
I think
do they feel safe.
I think there's a science behind the statistical sampling, and the same thing with, I'm more familiar with audits. So in audits, if they're doing an audit of a universe, they pick a smaller sample and there's a science behind that, and it determines how they make that pick. So I think that's the work Richard did with the UTSA to figure out the proper approach to ensure that we're getting accurate data.
I'll make my further comments later when we're
Yeah.
closed session.
I think that's an important switch to note, because I might have not been at the meeting or learned that we were switching methodology to this and using UTSA's data science team to help us verify, right? Like, okay, we're going to a statistical analysis model. Here are the metrics we need to hit to make sure that the data is reliable and valid. Having a data science partner behind the scenes checking all that, we have to switch our brains to, those are the right questions for the old method. Now there's a new method, and what do we need to be thinking about with this new way of looking at data?
Any other questions for Richard?
I looked ahead at the slides, and I don't think you're going to touch on this, so I'll just share it because it was in your slides, Richard. In the strategy development, you started talking about this idea of social cohesion, and you mentioned terms like trust, reciprocity, altruism. And that one in particular is one that's you can't do that without being close, proximate, and in relationship and making meaning together, right? If I sat down and started using these words with my parents, they'd be like, what are you talking about, right? Don't academic language me. What are we talking about here? And so it took my brain into, is this how we're talking about it with residents? What does this look like? And how are we bringing them along? That particular strategy, there were some that were in development. There was a list of 3. That one in particular, social cohesion, just feels could be really powerful and could be a place where we just over talk at people and aren't meeting the community in a place where we can have this conversation together, make meaning together. It's such a personal, talking about trust and reciprocity and altruism is such a they're all such personal topics. So it's just, that to me feels like the most needed in terms of having deep community conversations, leveraging the different systems and structures like the resident council meetings and other ways that the community is already organizing and having relationship with each other. So just my brain went there, and the big thing that stood out to me is that language feels inaccessible, and it's my hope that that's not how we're talking about it in the field.
Yeah, well, so this is still in development. I mean, I think we are still defining what's going to happen in the field, but from the conversations we've had so far, it is about conversations. It is about educating ourselves, educating residents, educating our stakeholders, and having continuous conversations so that there is a greater awareness of the specifics of each property, the specific needs of both communities and also the needs of employees, as mentioned here. And so that, and the top one there is residents know that they've been heard, so that there is a confidence that the residents' participation in the conversation is valid, right? That it's not just that they know they've been heard and that their ideas are helping guide decisions. I think the specifics of how we do that are still being worked out. Yeah.
So property improvement, I thought it was really important to try to do some before and after. And I know I've had a lot of conversations with different board members, and I think we presented. We actually have a member on our staff that actually goes out and flies a drone and takes snapshots of several of our properties. He's actually done all of our properties, all the public housing properties, as well as all the Beacon properties to get that. And I actually personally, and they know, staff know, I look at it because then I send lots of emails and say, we need lighting here, lighting here. But this was just one property that we have started addressing, and you can see the before and after, and there's substantial changes in just improving the lighting. But also we're learning it's not just the lighting that we're responsible for, right? We're also getting in contact with the city and CPS saying, you got some lights out too. And so making sure that we're making sure that the staff is making those contacts, we're getting those addressed. Outside of the drone, we're making sure that we have changed our procedures as well. I think many of the commissioners know that our techs are on call during the week for any emergencies that happen at night, and so part of what we've actually asked them to do is when you're out on property, make sure you're looking at checking the doors really quick at some of our senior properties, making sure there are no rocks. Move those if you can, as well as our security contractors. We actually asked them for the same thing. We're doing some additional requirements from our security as well, just because we, again, feedback from our residents saying and giving us some insight on how they perceive the contractors out there. And so we are deploying different resources to ensure that we know that they're following what we've asked them to do. And so today we've done about 37 different upgrades on the lighting. We are still upgrading some of our cameras, and as well as, like I said, Domingo and Joanna will be giving an update on that progress. Again, the entry keys, we're looking at keypads and key cards in different areas, not just the entry doors, but are there other places that we can put? One of the things that we do know, and we're trying to figure out how can we prevent this, right? If it is a code, how often are we changing that code? Because again, that's another mechanism, right? All the residents have it, but they tend to share it with other folks. And so we're trying to figure out what is the best way to get the new code out there so it doesn't always say 11111 for 3 years, right? Because then everybody starts learning that. We are looking at our gate and entry upgrades at a couple of the properties. We are I can't see right now. We're also looking at other creative ways, and a lot of this has really come from our staff out in the field. We talk a lot about resident feedback, but we challenge our team saying, you're out here day in and day out. You're the one that has to, unfortunately, go do a new make ready because it's, somehow it got broken into. And so I am pleased, actually, one of our maintenance supervisors, he's at one of our big three, he developed these steel plates as the units were being made ready, we put up instead of normal plywood because we did have a lot of individuals breaking into our units, and so that has helped. But he even went a little bit further on our screen doors because he said it's not just the safety of protecting this unit while we have it down and getting it ready for our next family, but what else can we do on the screen doors? So he has been working with a contractor to develop some metal plates on the screen doors so the residents still feel safe that they have that added protection on these aging properties. And so again, a lot of these things are done based off of the knowledge and the information that our maintenance supervisors are being very, very creative in trying to not only protect our assets, but also protect the residents at the same time. And then again, we talk a lot about our fire safety. We constantly looking at upgrading our panels and making sure that those are up to date. But, as we're taking on new properties back into our portfolio, we do see that sometimes there's delayed maintenance, and that's critical. We want to make sure that all of our safety mechanisms that we have at our properties are actually upgraded at the same time. Engagement. I know, Commissioner, you've asked a lot about how are we engaging, and I think it's, we are in constant engagement with our residents, community, partners, and staff, and I think that's key. Outside of our, Ed host a resident town hall that our team is there, but we've gone above and beyond that. It's not just those one-time meetings, but we are out there. Our team is attending neighborhood associations, right, to say we are here in the community. We want to listen to your concerns. We want to do this together, not separate in in silos. And so we're out there. Sometimes do we, get a earful? Absolutely. But I think that they are starting to see that. I think the board had saw, I think it was the Dignity Neighborhood Association had come and they had some concerns about some of the communities, but they saw us. They know that we're addressing some of these things, and so I think it's helpful. They're actually looking for resources too, like how do we do this together versus the narrative has really changed by us being out there. Property management and resident safety meetings, I think it's key. There's that's the residents, and the managers coming together monthly, or depending on the size of the property, it could be every other month or quarterly. We do have some tiny ones, but at those meetings, we bring in the experts. We bring in our safe officers. We bring in our contractors, and we have them discuss the security measures with them. So the residents hear it from somebody else, like SAPD, to sense this is what you're this is what needs to be done. This is how you prevent, how you can keep yourself safe. Be mindful of those. Donuts with the Director is another opportunity where Joelle and Melissa are out there and we're getting the feedback. We're listening to the residents. And that's unique to those properties versus, again, saying their needs may be different at Allison versus at one of our senior communities like W.C. White. We are meeting with the city. That's the Mirasol pilot, and we're talking about if we can get this up and running and looking at that model. How do we deploy this to other communities? I think the other big one that we have, and I think is the UTSA SAPD violent crime reduction. Though we are not part of that actual process, or SAPD and UTSA are working together, one of our properties was identified. And so we will be, and have been working with those two entities. They're coming out to our properties. They're asking us a lot of questions. There is surveys, and what I do know, I think Commissioner Powell, you had asked, is there a citywide survey? Like Richard said, I don't think there has been, but what I do know is with this survey, it's not just the Opportunity Home community that has been. There's a couple of other hotspots that they're addressing, and they will be doing a survey amongst those communities. It's not citywide, but at least maybe we'll start getting data there. But I think it is important, right? They're giving us additional resources, they're giving us tools, and they're recognizing that it is it's multiple organizations coming together and really trying to solve some of these concerns that we see across the city. So that concludes the presentation, but not questions that I know Commissioner Casillas is going to ask. No, you brought it. I saw that movement.
I'll ask later.
Okay.
I did have one more question about, you mentioned that some of the properties have localized spots like laundry areas where folks who are experiencing homelessness might be congregating. Do we have contacts with either city outreach workers or outreach folks from other agencies that regularly drop in on those areas?
So I think we can definitely do a better job at making sure that we reach out. We talk about it when we're meeting with the city and saying we have these, we've actually, I work really closely, my team works closely with James to say we're also with the council district. Like this is it's not a unique problem to Opportunity Home. And so we know that there's resources with the city, and so we have been engaging, but I think we can probably do a little bit better coordination between all organizations.
Yeah, and I think, so the city has dedicated outreach staff, but also just working with Close to Home to make sure that their members are aware that some of these could be areas that overlap with places where they have a focus.
Absolutely, thank you. Okay.
Thank you, Richard and Brandy. All right, discussion item number 7. Update and discussion regarding the camera and intrusion protection project for mid and high-rise communities. Joanna Alvarado, Director of Innovative Technology, and Domingo Ibarra, Director of Security.
Hi, good afternoon. So I'm going to do an update on the project for public housing camera and intrusion protection update. Brandy and Richard alluded to it as part of our goals to keep residents safe. But another thing we're doing with these security systems and intrusion protection systems is to keep staff safe as well as protect property. We're accomplishing this by implementing the consistent state-of-the-art technology that is the latest and the greatest technology out there for camera systems and intrusion protection systems, which means the keypads and so on, and alarm systems. We're going to go over the scope of work, the equipment, and the platforms that we're using. Right now, so far in the project, the completed properties are listed there: Victoria Plaza, Springview, W.C. White, Lila Cockrell, Jewett Circle, and Via Tranquesi. We started off with 19 properties. We're showing the cameras there and the way that they look at the different properties, and also the keypads at the doors upon entry. You can see that Springview and Via Tranquesi is bolded because they were also part of the safety and security grant that we received, and we needed to get those funds expended and installed. So those two have also been completed with the camera systems as well as part of that grant. What have we done at each property? So at each property, we're putting in cameras. We're of course doing all the new cable runs. We're not taking old and existing. We are taking any camera systems that were there before and taking them out and putting in new cable. We're putting the IP camera installations, putting in the hardware and switch installations that are new equipment in the background as well. And of course, we're doing all the configuration and testing. For the intrusion protection, we're also doing the cable runs that are brand new. We're doing automatic door integration, so any properties that have automatic doors, we put the keypads there as well so they can be used as needed. And then we're doing a door striker installation and the key fob reader, which means they can wave the reader and they can get access to any of the doors that have those readers and keypads. And then we're, of course, conducting staff training at the administrative level. The community managers and the maintenance staff at each of the properties are getting properly trained, and we are appointing an administrator as well as an IT administrator that understands the use of this technology so that we always have a backup of who can access the technology. And then we are training in the alarm and badge access platform as well. So the actual our partner is Via Technologies, and they do a lot of the training for all of the staff to ensure that they're able to access the system and use it. This is an example of Victoria Plaza and the camera placements. We go out at each of the properties. This is the mid to high rise project. That means that all these properties that we're talking about are at least 3 floors or more in this phase of the strategy for us to go out and implement security cameras. This is Victoria Plaza, and you can see that we place them outside at every elevator entrance, at every external entry door, and the community rooms, and the main office door as well. And the main office door is those offices where our staff is. This is an example of the fob reader placements. We also make sure that there is a fob reader and keypad for the fire department and SAPD or whoever needs to enter, and we put them at the side entrances as well as the front entrance. Some of the challenges and delays that we face in the project so far with the cameras, we need to have access to storage areas. In a lot of our properties, there is limited storage, so sometimes in our our IT closets. There's a lot of property in there that needs to be relocated for us to be able to install the equipment, so that's caused a few delays. We've had some electrical issues because, again, we've had some older electrical installations that we've had to go in there and either upgrade, or we've had to add more electricity so that we can support the new equipment as well. Some scaffolding, just because we're always doing work on our properties and there's some construction that happens that may delay us. And then we've had, of course, bandwidth limitations. We did do estimates to begin with what this bandwidth is going to take, because with this system, of course, comes bandwidth, just like any network. So we've gone back and evaluated that, and we are making improvements to ensure that the bandwidth can meet the needs, because we are running these cameras 24/7, and they are tracking and they are recording in the cloud. So all that takes bandwidth, right? So we've had to do some increasing of our network, and even creating third networks to support this camera system as well. And of course, we've done the staff training, and that is sometimes a delay due to scheduling and difficulty of getting people together. For the intrusion protection challenges, we have a lot of different doors, as you can see there, and some of them have been there for a long time. So we've had to get very innovative and creative and being able to make sure that those keypads can be accessible and used in those different doors. And some of the gates that we have, there's been some properties that we did not necessarily think or include that in the initial design, that we're going to put a keypad or change the keypad that is on existing gates at some of these properties. So we've had a challenge of looking at those and seeing, okay, how are we going to make this happen? Do we have to refabricate? Do we have to upgrade? And in some cases, we have had to do that for the gate for it to be able to support this latest technology. The equipment, I'm not going to go into details and put too much technology on you, but we are using state-of-the-art cameras. They look kind of like that. Actually, they all look like that, and they are HD, high definition, and 4K resolution. So the look of them and how you see people, faces, and so on, and action is really, really good. Has really good infrared illumination, night and day, and motion detection. The motion detection is also light supported, which means that if it is dark and somebody comes in the area of the camera, the light will turn on and hopefully startle away anybody that is intruding at the time. And we're also using the CloudView platform. That is our cloud platform that we're using for all of the video recordings. This is how the key fobs look and the keypads. They're programmable. We can put schedules on them, do a lot to them because they are software driven. They're managed by Alarm.com, and they are encrypted fob communication, which is higher security as well. And again, they are available for all of our residents. Each resident is given a key fob. What I should have put, I think I did put it on the challenges, that some of the challenges is continuing to replenish the supply of the key fobs, because a lot of our residents are losing them, breaking them, or things like that. So we're keeping up with that. We're keeping up with that demand. We put in a process internally through IT and procurement to procure those in a timely manner. The platforms, here's the look at the CloudView video recording and playback. That gives you some really nice screenshots of what our staff can look at and see and look for. They can look at different times, dates, go back whenever they need to. If there's an incident and they have a date and a time of the incident, if they're working with SAPD, we can always go back and look at the history of what has been recorded and bring it up. And it's easy to send via email, text, or download if necessary for SAPD. We've already done that many times to support any investigations that they are working on. This is dashboards for the intrusion protection, the Alarm.com. This is also available to staff where they can see when alarms are disarmed or not. They can also do this remotely. All of this technology is available to them on their business cell phones as well, so they can get alerts on their phones about any incident that may be happening at a different time of night or things like that. And the maintenance staff and I believe the community manager have access to that, so that they can go out and see what's going on, both with the alarm and with the video cameras. These are the properties that are part of this project. I've already told you about the completed ones. The ones that are in progress are listed there. I had a meeting yesterday with the team, and I believe Lewis Chatham, some Park Lane, and actually all those in progress are almost about 90, they're about 90% done now. So it's looking real good to get a lot of those done. And then the next steps are those listed. I do have a timeline here that shows that we expect to complete all of these properties by May 17th of this fiscal year. We are pretty much on time. We maybe get a day or two behind on different things, but for the most part, we feel like we're going to hit that goal line. And thank you to our partners, CloudView and of course VIA Technologies. They've been instrumental in helping us. They go above and beyond to really support the team and be there for us. Just yesterday, we had an issue at one of the properties where they were not able to open the door. And I think it was where they're working on Marie McGuire, and they couldn't use their fob, they couldn't get in, and VIA was there within 10 minutes. This was after 5. So we really appreciate their partnership in Alarm.com. And this includes my presentation. Any questions? I don't know what happened to my questions slide. And Domingo is here to answer any questions. Should it be here or in closed session?
Just a quick question. Our security company, do they have access to the keypad to be able to get in and out? Because we had Firewatch there, and I noticed somebody putting a rock on the side door. And I went up to him, and it happened to be the security guard who was there overnight. And he stepped out, I guess, to get some air or something, and he had to put a rock. And so I asked him if he had a way to get in and out, and he said no. So
thank you for the question, Commissioner. There was a question of transition here, and this is where we're going from the old system to the new system and when we actually go live. So when that happens and that information does not get relayed to the management for Texas Law and Security, then at that point, they don't get it posted on their local device, which is their phones, sometimes their laptops. That's happened a couple of times, but we went back and retrofitted some of those issues. Thank you. I might add one thing about the cameras, which is, I think, exceptional. We never had the ability to put what's called geofencing. So we can actually outline an area that would be considered high risk for whatever reason, and that would trigger a notice to several of us. And now our crime analysts also have access to review these cameras because we're on call 24/7, 365. So if something happens at 2 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, it doesn't matter. We can actually go just like the managers and maintenance techs and review what happened and supply that to SAPD Fusion in real time. Thank you.
This is, we didn't talk about it in the presentation, and you know, there's like an assumption, and I just want to make sure that because this is a public meeting and there's many different stakeholders in the audience that hear this information, when you look at this last part about, you know, cameras and safety, it would be helpful just to name, like we see some properties, not others, like what you all have. It's hard, you know, contextually, like out of the entire portfolio, why these, is it related to data and safety and crime and the prioritization, just a little context, so that community folks and partners who are here in the room would understand and know, and even for the board's edification, you're seeing this set of properties, this is how it connects to our facilities plan or safety plan to get, you know, to whatever goal of cameras and, you know, whatnot. And we started here because the data says that these are the, you know, highest need or highest crime, whatever that is. But I think from this presentation, there's an opportunity to further educate us and make sure the community knows transparently the prioritization.
Yes, and thank you for that. We'll certainly include that in future presentations. Some of the background, the focus has been on senior properties because that is where the complaints have been coming from. We've actually heard other comments from family properties, and the comment there is they don't want security cameras installed. You know, I've heard that from residents, myself, from residents at Alazan, for example, that they don't want cameras. It's more the high rises, the senior facilities that we've been focusing on for that reason instead.
Thank you, Commissioner. I might add that the structure itself lends itself, the high rise and the mid to high rise, because you've got limited access points as opposed to where you have a large footprint like Alazan, Casiano, or Lincoln. where it's just not practical to have cameras scattered through all those areas. But that's why we have phase 1 and phase 2. But thank you for the comments.
Any other questions?
Yes. I just think eventually, though, that needs to be some type of, we need to come up with some type of planning for those open area properties, because where there's high crime, if you're a criminal, you don't want cameras.
Yep.
Yes. So we are working on submitting an RFP for the second phase, that it will include another 18 properties and family properties that we're going to be sending out so that we can complete and expend it by May 1st, and then start that whole project as well. So we plan on doing the same strategy, if you will, in design. We're not going to be going out because of what, like Ed says, and what we've heard from the community and some of the data that we have seen. We're not going to, of course, populate the entire properties, especially these family properties. They are more spread out. They have a lot of acreage, and this design doesn't lend to that. So we're going to do the community rooms, the areas that are that we mostly have an issue, and that community managers are reporting back to us, and so that we kind of hear them and listen to them, and we're putting the cameras in place using that information.
Joanne, I do want to say thanks on the work that you've done so far. I mean, I can speak for where I live, and I hear a lot of positive comments from residents that they're happy that they're able to come in and out through the front door now. If it's raining or whatever, they can be dropped off in the front door under the cover and stuff, or the handicap can now, come out through there with their wheelchairs and be picked up right at the front door and everything. So thank you for that. And I'm sure at the other properties, I'm sure that they'll be feeling the same way.
Yes, I appreciate that, Commissioner Casillas, and you've offered us a lot of feedback to ensure that we, put the best design in for all properties. And what we've done with the cadence meetings is we've added the community managers and the maintenance supervisors to the team to be able to talk to the vendors directly and let us know what their issues are and the challenges they're facing, so that we can make sure that we're accommodating, that we're meeting the needs, because they're the ones, again, that are boots on the ground and facing these challenges. So it's really great to listen to them and make adjustments accordingly when we need to. So you provide us a lot of feedback, so we appreciate that.
But thank you. And I'll have some further questions, but in closed session.
Okay.
Any other questions? Counselor, if you'll take us into closed.
Yes, sir.
Thank
The
you.
board will be convening in closed session to discuss personnel and consult with its attorney under 551.074 and 551.071 of the Texas Government Code to discuss regarding board roles and responsibilities, and also the president and CEO's performance goals and appraisal for the 2023-2024 year. Of the Texas Government Code, and discuss security issues and measures in consultation with attorney regarding the security. The time is 2:53.
Opportunity Homes San Antonio's Operations and Real Estate Committee meeting is now adjourned. The time is 4:06 p.m.